All right, we got some big news here in the state of Kentucky. We were just awarded a very large sum of money to support small businesses in the state. So the headline of this article here and this announcement is $117 million of federal award to increase access to capital for Kentucky small businesses is being given out here. So let's first talk about the origins of this. So this is the State Small Business Credit Initiative that the Biden administration has put in place. $10 billion is being given to states across the country. And this is Kentucky's beneficiary. This is what we're being awarded here. So jump back over to that article. Let's talk about some aspects of this.
Yeah, so we just want to go through and pull out some of the key points that we found within this article that really stood out to us as we read through it, and just talk through those, give our opinions on them. So the first point here is that the funding is to support not only venture capital programs, but also loan support programs and community development financial institutions, with an emphasis on access to capital for underserved business owners. So one of the quotes from Governor Beshear here just says, these funds are a boost for businesses still recovering from the pandemic, but also represent a potential watershed for the future of innovative businesses in our state. This significantly increases the capital available to promising businesses at critical early stages and helps lay the foundation for Kentucky's innovative economy of the future. So if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you've heard us talk about access to capital. You've heard us talk about the amount of venture capital that is available in this state. So to see some of this money be dedicated towards the use from our friends like Key Horse Capital, which we'll get into here in just a second, is a really exciting thing. What's your first thought when you see something like this, that Key Horse Capital is going to be receiving some of these funds?
Yeah, it's great. You know, businesses like my own receive funding from the state, specifically Key Horse Capital, to grow our businesses and get them off the ground. It's huge need. You know, if you look at the most innovative parts of the United States on the coast, San Francisco, Boston, New York City, Seattle, you know, these places in America have the most venture capital. That's not a coincidence.
Yep.
Talented people need capital to build and use their skills and build businesses using those skills. And so this is huge for the state. Yeah,
and just to give some context on Key Horse Capital. So Key Horse Capital is the venture funding arm for the Kentucky Science and Technology Corporation. So we had Terry Samuel back on the podcast. That was back 2-3 seasons ago. So if you haven't listened to that podcast and you want to know what Kentucky Science and Technology Corporation does, I would recommend going and listening to that. But Key Horse Capital is how they invest in early stage companies through their venture capital arm. So we want to click over to their portfolio just so you can get an idea of some of the companies that they've invested in, a lot of which have been on our podcast. You'll see companies like Cloverleaf, Behave VR, Edge Sports, Feed Coyote, Go Wild. We could go down here and list off quite a few that Key Horse has funded that we've gotten to have on the podcast over the years. So they're doing some great work making sure these Kentucky companies have access to capital. Now they're just going to be supercharged by the funding that is being allocated to the state through this new award. So moving on down here to some other points that stood out to us in this article. We also see here that Key Horse will create some educational programs to foster a new generation of venture capital fund managers and give them the resources they need to be successful in growing Kentucky's venture capital community.
I think this one's huge.
This is something that I think Middle Tech is really passionate about, providing that education. Obviously, that education will probably largely be provided through media and through programming that is so desperately needed for these kinds of programs in our state. I feel like there's just not enough conversation around venture capital as is. So to be able to provide that to the next generation of fund managers, I think is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the capital that you need to deploy, you need smart people to deploy it, and we need more of that here in the state. So that's big. I also would love to see more education funding around STEM, but also education around angel investment. Angel community here in Kentucky could use a boost, and I think there's a lot of educational curriculum that could be geared towards angels as well, not just fund managers, but angels themselves. Because I think there's a lot of programs that the state puts on, like the angel tax credit, that many aren't aware of. But then once you get them aware of that, they need to know how to interface with founders, what to ask founders, how to deploy money into these companies. I think that education's a really big piece of that. And as you said, media plays a really big role in that as well.
Yeah. Moving on down through this, I think next important point just to discuss here is that this is not only going towards venture capital, like we said. Funding will also support 2 programs intended to make it easier for lending institutions to finance creditworthy businesses in need of additional capital. I think the main point here to pull out is that not all businesses are going to be a good fit for venture capital. So that's where these small business loans come into play. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on those businesses that are not necessarily venture capital backed businesses, but I think it is important to know that some of this money is going to be supporting those types of businesses.
I mean, Kentucky's traditionally known for manufacturing, more conservative business models. Lending is kind of their way of scaling. They don't use traditional venture capital that we talk about often on this podcast and on our shows. So loan programs are a big part of that. Also, there's many businesses that already have a successful business model, and they might just need money in a time of need. So whether that's disaster relief or other programs like that, that's important too. And those are typically done through loans versus any kind of venture capital or equity investment.
Yeah, and I think it's important to highlight with these loans, they're really geared towards helping businesses that are either classified as very small businesses or minority-owned businesses, or businesses that are either based or plan to be based in disaster relief areas. So really taking that money and making sure it's going towards small businesses that really need that money in a lot of ways. Moving on down through here. So I think this is just kind of fun to talk about how and sing some praises for Governor Beshear, because he's really had an awesome administration when it comes to investment in the state. So this little point that I pulled out here is, since the beginning of his administration, Governor Beshear has announced the creation of 43,200 full-time jobs, 828 private sector new location and expansion projects, totaling $24.6 billion in announced investments. And because of that, with the books closed on 2022, those 2 years are the best 2-year period in state history for economic growth. I mean, that's pretty incredible. It's kick-ass.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's coming up for re-election, and hopefully he gets re-elected, honestly, on these results. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Speaks for themselves.
Yeah.
So some of the most significant investments from his administration are going to be trying to position the state of Kentucky as the EV battery production capital of the United States. So we're going to show some of the pictures and some of the progress from those. But just to read these points here real quick, he announced the Ford Motor Co. and SK Innovation project, which is a $5.8 billion investment that will create 5,000 jobs in Hardin County. Is that the one that's near Elizabethtown?
It's Glendale, Kentucky. So it's basically Elizabethtown, Kentucky. Glendale is like a town of like 1,800 people. They're dropping 5,000 new jobs in that small town. So Elizabethtown is kind of like the hub. There's a community college there that's going to support that project with education and on-the-ground support. And then, it's already a town of about 40,000 people. And I heard from a friend who's one of the largest real estate developers in Elizabethtown that they brought in an independent group to do some basically projections on what this means for the city of Elizabethtown. And about 100,000 people are projected to be living in Elizabethtown over the next so many years. I forgot what the number of years was. It might have been 10, but that's not even the same city. So that kind of stuff is how important these projects are to the region. That's 50,000 people.
Yeah, that's
wild.
Insane. Well, let's click over to and I'll enlarge this a little bit so we can see a little bit better. But just looking through some of the progress of this $5.8 billion factory that is being built for EV production. Of course, they want to show me an advertisement. Get out of here.
Just click on the pictures. Yeah.
There we go. Okay, back to this. Just kind of shows the state of progress that we're seeing there. So coming along.
I drove by this the other day on the way down to Nashville. It's looking good. Gray Construction here in Kentucky is one of the big ones working on that here in Lexington. Nice. We got some friends working on this project that we know.
There's the electric Ford that they're building there.
So this is also important to Ford, super important to Ford, because they actually had to shut down production of this vehicle because they were having battery supply chain issues. So this is like mission critical for Ford to get this up and running. It's great that this is happening in the state.
Yeah, I love that. And then the other project that we were referencing that has happened during Beshear's administration is this Envision AESC, which has announced a $2 billion investment that will create 2,000 jobs in Warren County. So this is another EV battery plant that's being built near Bowling Green. So we'll click over to this one. This one is more so just a groundbreaking right now. To zoom in on this one a little bit. But the fact that this is also happening in Kentucky and we're really making an effort to position ourselves as a leader in this EV battery production is a huge, huge deal.
Yeah, we're in top three.
Yeah, just because you see this is where things are trending now as we're trying to make this transition away from internal combustion engines towards these electric vehicles. The country's going to need a lot of batteries, and it looks like a good portion of those batteries are going to be coming from the state of Kentucky.
Yeah, it's all down the I-65 corridor. You got Tennessee, Georgia, and Kentucky are leading, as last I saw, I think, across the United States. So we're right in the right area of this. I-65 is where a lot of the manufacturing of vehicles happens across the United States. So we're a key part of that.
Yeah. So those are the main points that we wanted to pull away from this article. Obviously, just super exciting to know that $117 million has been awarded to the state of Kentucky through this program. And a big congratulations and shout out to all the hard work of Kentucky Innovation, Governor Beshear's administration, and anybody else that helped facilitate these funds getting to our state. It's a really big deal. We're really excited about it. Like I said, we've talked about access to capital and the lack thereof on this podcast for a long time. So obviously, we're pretty pumped about it.
Yeah.
So
founders here are super scrappy. They have to do with what they have, and there's amazing founders here that, when given the chance with capital coming from their own backyard, are going to thrive. Oftentimes, if a founder wants to grow beyond, let's say, seed round, they might be able to get pre-seed money here and seed, but anything beyond the seed round, they have to leave Kentucky. Hopefully, you have more founders starting companies in that pre-seed and seed that the state can continue to support, but also beyond that seed round. But it is a reality that founders here have to leave it. So hopefully this creates a scenario where less have to leave, or that the state just gets to invest more in these companies, so that when they're a success and there's an exit, that money gets cycled back throughout the entire ecosystem. So this is really important, and hopefully it builds a lot of momentum over the next 10, 20 years, because that's kind of the life cycle.
I think one final thought to leave this with is, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Evan. You're probably more versed in this than I am. But I think this is an interesting time for this to be happening too, as we kind of head towards what looks like a pretty uncertain economic future, probably a recession most likely. And you start to see venture capital dry up in other areas outside of the state of Kentucky. It seems like it'd be a good sign that we have some money flowing in to support Key Horse Capital specifically and investing in Kentucky companies. Hopefully that'll be a good outlet for these companies if, as it dries up in other places that they might have gone to search for it outside of the state.
Well, the way I look at this is, if you look at, whenever there's economic hardship, oftentimes the best companies come out of those times.
They're
companies that build the most profitable models. They're companies that, have the most constraints and have to, force themselves to get really creative with how they build their companies or their business models. So this is, a great time to invest, in innovation, because in hard times, oftentimes out of that comes innovation like Uber, Airbnb. Many of the greatest companies we know today oftentimes are coming out of recessions or economically hard times in the United States. So great time to invest. And it's also a good time to invest because there's just going to be a lot of innovation going forward from here. With artificial intelligence and everything going on that front, there's going to be a lot of new business models and companies popping up that can take advantage of that. And this is going to be viewed as one of those big economic shifts that happened in the technology space that is a brand new platform, whether it's web to mobile or on-prem to cloud. AI is going to be one of those. Hopefully we start to see some AI companies pop out of Kentucky. We've seen a few investments done recently, so more of that. It's a unique time, just to summarize what you just said.
For sure. All right, so that's our update for you guys. Keep following Middle Tech for more news updates like this. We air our normal episode every Monday. We're going to start airing that a little bit earlier, so look for that Monday mornings. And other than that, I hope you guys got something from this article. We'll talk to you next time.